Hey guys, how's it going? This is okay. I'm really tired. Let's get the ball rolling here because work has been kicking my ass. Like I'm sure it's been kicking some of your asses, and we all just need a vacation. You know what I'm saying? And if not work for you, then school. If not school, then life. If not life, then welcome, my fellow undead. Wait, let's get the ball rolling with the first game I want to talk about, and that is Ruined King. First of all, I should probably say that I'm not big on League of Legends. Okay, no, calm down. Don't crucify me. I don't think it's a bad game. I just, the community kind of ruins the experience for me. Otherwise, it's a really good game, and I really enjoy it. That said, I've always had a particular interest in many of the champions in League of Legends, as well as other things that have spawned from that franchise, like KDA, Arcane, and now Ruined King. This was one of many games that came with their... I don't remember what it was, but it was like some big event or whatever that they did alongside one of the world things. I don't know. Someone who knows League better than me, tell me what it is I'm describing. It was one of those games that they were describing along with the fighting game and the MMO they were talking about, and then that one project that eventually became Valorant. And since then, I've been like, I'm looking at you. I'm a play you. So here we are. Visually, Ruined King really pushes the simple is best style, at least in my opinion, and it doesn't try too hard to reach the same level of graphical fidelity as Aloy's Peach Fuzz. Oh, you thought I forgot about you, Horizon. I haven't forgotten you. I'll come back. One of these days. Mark my words. And that's not a problem. The art style of Ruined King has a pop that is charming enough to be pleasant to look at, but is often contrasted by the comic booky visuals of various cinematics in the game, with the exception of the opening cinematic for the game that reflects the style of Arcane. Gameplay-wise, well, it's a turn-based game with a focus on lane management. If you put your ability on the bottom, then it'll hit harder, but it'll hit later in your turn. If you put it on the top lane, it will hit sooner, but weaker. You can also speed up combat, which is a nice touch for those who are a little impatient or just simply wants to speed things along. Side note, I actually think that's a very cool feature, and I think more turn-based games in RPGs should have that. Might be a controversial opinion. You tell me in the comments below if you want more turn-based games to have a speed-up function. For me, that's not entirely, required, but it's a nice little, accessibility or quality of life thing. The gameplay in of itself isn't too difficult if you are used to turn-based games, but it's challenging enough to catch you off guard sometimes if you get careless. That said, on a quick note, the interaction nodes you have to interact with during the game for puzzles, they're terrible. I'm just going to say that flat out. I normally don't get that blunt when it comes to this stuff, but the detection for them is terrible. You'll be standing right there, you'll press it, and then you'll want to press it again, but I found myself having to walk away from it a few times just to come back and press the button again. And press the button again. I would mash the A button on my controller so many times just for it to recognize my inputs sometimes. But that's my only major complaint there. So, long story short, gameplay is a lot of fun, really challenging, and you can get murked if you're careless. But the interactions sometimes that you have with like different objects or puzzles, I'm gonna flip a table. Real quick, let's talk about the main cast briefly because I don't want to go into spoilers. The main cast that makes up your party in Ruined King is Boobs. Misfortune, Alawi, Yasuo, Ari, Braum, Best Boy, in other words, and Pike, Edgy Boy. They are consistently entertaining whenever they're on screen, and honestly, that can't be said for a lot of party-based RPGs. I've played some where maybe 3 out of the 6 cast members are actually entertaining, or worth being invested in, and the others are kind of like, I'm just there. I'm looking at you, Persona 5, who introduced Haru towards the tail end of the game. I didn't play Royal yet, so Royal might have reflected that, but Persona 5, the OG one, I didn't have strong feelings towards Haru for that very reason, because I'm like, you showed up too late. I don't really care about you. This game, on the other hand, does that part right. You get everyone relatively soon in a very organic way in the game. That said, if I'm being fair, Ruined King is a pretty short game, about 25 to 30 hours long, and Persona 5 is like 100 hours. So of course, when you have the majority of the cast in the forefront of the game within the first 40 hours of the game, and then the last one doesn't show up until maybe hour 80, of course it's going to feel lopsided versus I spent 15 hours with this game and I got most of the cast within that time, and by hour 16, I had everybody. All that aside, if you don't care about the game's story, which admittedly is meh, okay, you'll at least like, or really like, the main cast, and that'll be enough to keep you going. That's not to say that the story is bad, though. It's serviceable enough to get the ball rolling and give you a genuinely enjoyable experience. Ruin King is a go for it. If you're a fan of League of Legends and are looking for a game to play to give you more League and more of the characters you love and the world you love, then play it. If you're not a fan of League of Legends, but are looking for a solid turn-based RPG to play, then play it. If you're happy that Riot is finally fleshing out the world of League in the form of other projects like Arcane, then by all means, play it. You won't regret it. Ruin King is available on the PS5, Xbox Series S, and Series S. Screw you, Xbox, for your naming conventions. PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Nintendo Switch. In other words, it's on everything. I could have just said that. It's on everything. And to top that off, it's only $30, so you're definitely getting the bang for your buck. Moving on to the next game, Tormented Souls. Tormented Souls is a game that I've been meaning to play for a while, but alas, sometimes I am a coward. What? Horror games may make my heart go doki doki, but that doesn't mean I always have the balls to deal with them. Tormented Souls takes a lot after old school Resident Evil and a bit after Silent Hill, which also means that I occasionally, mostly towards the end of the game, looked up a hint or three in a guide when I needed a bit of help or I was just feeling lazy at the time, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it'd be like that, because the game is not light on puzzles. I will tell you that now. But again, that's not on the game though. That's just my patience, which varies by the day. They were fantastic puzzles overall, and most of the ones I did on my own were very satisfying, with maybe one or two that truly had me stumped. I've also got to say, the game did a damn good job not only feeling like Resident Evil, but also feeling like its own thing. Visually, it's not what I would call a beautiful game, but the game is definitely great to look at, just not stunning. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, you cute, but only from 5 miles away. Okay, that's rude. What I mean is, the game is definitely good to look at, and there are definitely some awe-inspiring places in the game, but you can tell it's a bit on it's on the indie side. Serviceable. That's all I'm gonna use that word again. It's serviceable to look at. Sometimes you'll go, ooh, that looks nice, and other times you'll be like, ooh, that could look better. Caroline, the woman you play as, aka the MC, sticks out like a sore thumb. But other than her, everything else looks fine. Well, not everything else. The character models in general stand out a lot. Like, if I had to compare it to Resident Evil, which is unfair, but I'm going to do it for the sake of just how the Resident Evil characters blend in with the environment, and how Caroline, the priest, and the monsters kind of stand out just a little bit, but that could just be the way that they are, I don't want to say modeled. Maybe it's how they react to light, I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. You see the footage, you tell me. I just know that it doesn't look as good as it could. That's what I'm going to say. Other than that, the animations are a little janky, but again, here's the favorite word. They're serviceable. Gameplay-wise, it's also very much like Resident Evil, and features 10 controls for keyboard and mouse and full 360 movement with controller, which I find very interesting. Like, I just think that's really cool. Like, if you want to play with keyboard and mouse, you get 10 controls. You want to play with a controller, you can move in a full 360. It's a little weird in the sense when cameras are switching because the cameras are fixed and whatnot, but thankfully when you're running around in full 360 movement and all that, if you're still holding the direction you were going in, the camera change will still keep the direction you're running in until you stop and start moving again. On top of that, the game is actually kind of difficult since Caroline is pretty squishy. For those who don't know what I mean by that, I mean that Caroline can only really take up to maybe 4 hits from a basic enemy before she dies. For the bigger dudes, like the tougher dudes, God help you, that's like 2 hits and you're dead. Tormented Souls also has a mechanic that may or may not be inspired by Alone in the Dark, where the darkness will insta-kill you if you don't have a light source out on your person or holding a lighter in your hands in dark areas. Considering that this game is a love letter to other survival horror games, very popular ones, I'm going to just assume this is inspired by Alone in the Dark. I've only really played one, and I believe that mechanic was in there. It would make sense, hence the title. That mechanic would also make you very vulnerable, since so long as you're holding your light source, in this case the lighter, which you spend most of the game with, you can't use any other weapons that you have, not without killing yourself. Narratively, the story is straightforward and average by horror game standards. I won't spoil here, but it's not much to write home about, and is honestly entirely predictable. Well, almost entirely, but still very predictable. I'd say like You can predict 90% of the story from the jump. As for the voice acting, I'm trying to decide whether or not they intentionally wanted it to sound terrible. Because, again, the old school survival horror games, part of their charm, at least charm by today's standards, was how terrible the voice acting was. For Silent Hill, it's the kind of the whole shtick of it's very uncanny valley for that game. For this game, I don't know. I honestly don't know. So I'm going to say the voice acting is bad. Whether or not you find it charming is up to you. For me, it was a little grating, not gonna lie. One last thing before I give the final verdict though. The game has a lot of audio issues. They're mostly in the vein of just not being balanced too well, which is more of an opinion. And they don't always play, which is the bug part. This mostly occurred with Caroline's footsteps and moments when the nail gun is drowned out by something else or when the camera is too far back. So I guess the sound of the nail gun is tied to something with the camera. Like if the camera's very far back, you're not going to hear the nail gun as well as when it's closer to Caroline. And in other cases, sometimes Caroline will walk on a surface and you won't hear any footsteps from her. Like you'll hear her walking on wood, but sometimes you won't hear her walking on metal. You won't hear her walking through a bit of water or anything else, but by the time she steps on wood again, there's her feet. I just thought I'd point that out. All in all, I've had a blast with this game and highly recommend it to lovers of the old school survival horror games, especially since the game, again, is a love letter to those games. That said, if you are not a fan of the classic style of survival horror, then I can't recommend it to you. Tormented Souls, though, for me, is a go for it. Tormented Souls is available on the PS5, Xbox Series S, and Series... It's on everything. I'm not doing that whole thing again. It's on everything. And it's only $20. And finally, the last game, UnMetal. Do you like Metal Gear Solid? I like Metal Gear Solid. I haven't played every Metal Gear Solid, but I'm convinced that you don't need to get a kick out of this hilarious parody of Metal Gear Solid. That said, there are a lot of hilarious games out there that turn out to be so-so overall. So, how did I feel about Metal Gear? I did it again. How did I feel about UnMetal in general? Well, visually, the game very much reflects the old 8/16, I don't really know what style of bit, original Metal Gear Solid game. But there are some extra bits and bobs thrown in there to make the game look more fresh. Honestly, I love the style of this game, and I don't have anything to complain about with it, which is great. More importantly, the story is on the bonkers side of things. I mean, it's a parody of Metal Gear, so I would expect it to be bonkers, to be honest. You play as Jesse Fox, the protagonist, who is recounting the events that led to his capture at the beginning of the game. This allows for many, and I mean many, funny narrative moments as he tries to recall things that happened in his mission to escape the thing that I can't tell you about for spoiler's sake. In a nutshell, just expect to laugh a lot and simply not ask questions. The cool thing about this is that they also use this as a way to give you hints and whatnot. I won't give a specific example, but I will make up one just for this. Let's say you're playing as Jesse Fox and you're trying to go to your car. You have an item in your inventory that'll get you in that car faster, but instead you decide to punch out the window. Well, the game will fade to the conversation most of the time between Jesse Fox and the one who's interrogating him. And the dude who's interrogating him will be like, "Wait, Mr. Fox, why did you punch out the window when you could have just used the key that you said you had on your person?" And then Jesse would give some bullshit reason as to why he decided to do that. Or if he can't even think of one, he'll just say, "I don't know, it looked at me funny," or something along those lines, which is, really, it kind of makes you want to do a lot of things outside of what you would expect to do for different areas of the game and different times of the game, just to see how they react to it. Speaking of that, the gameplay is surprisingly involved for a game that I thought would be pretty simple. It only gave me like one way to fight, one way to dodge, one way to move, etc. I don't know why that was my thought going into it. I just figured it wouldn't be as in-depth as it actually is. On top of the many locations that you'll visit and, well, maybe not that many, but the locations you visit and the secrets that are in the game and the puzzly gameplay here and there, you can also combine different things in your inventory to make an item that you need for a specific part of the mission. Sometimes you'll get a hint for that. Other times, you'll need to think outside of the box. It can also be pretty difficult sometimes if you're not careful. UnMetal is also a short game that doesn't overstay its welcome, which is great because games that rely on its comedy a lot of the time are probably not great to drag out for too long, so I appreciate it. UnMetal is a game that I'd recommend to any Metal Gear Solid fan, stealth game fan, or even just a fan of games that give them a good laugh. So in case it wasn't clear already, yes, the game is a go for it. That's 3 go for it's in this batch. Nice. UnMetal is also available on everything. It is only $20. And well, that's it for this patch review. So now I'm going to take the time to play and get through the next few games, though there have been a few changes to that list I mentioned before in my update video. What those changes are? Well, you'll have to find out in the next video. In the meantime, look out for the next Where We Stand videos coming to DuoQ. I hope you all have enjoyed your stay. I'm TUSDarryl. See you guys later.